So, Fabienne, the time is now 7 o'clock. I'm going to begin.
Perfect. Go right ahead, Joseph.
So, hello, everyone. My name is Joseph. I am a member of Hashimoto's Awareness, and I'll be facilitating this conference call this evening. I'd like to first introduce the co-founder and co-creative director of Hashimoto's Awareness, Fabienne Heymans.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. And Happy New Year, by the way. Wishing you all a fabulous and especially a healthy one.
Happy New Year, Fabienne.
Thank you, Joe. You too.
So, Fabienne, would you like to introduce our guest speaker tonight?
Absolutely. You want to go to the logistic afterwards? Okay, yes. So tonight, it is a pleasure to start the new year with you, first of all, and to introduce you to Dr. Sachin Patel, our keynote speaker for this January forum. And we had the honor to meet him, Pearl and I, when we attended the Thyroid Mastermind in Colorado last year. Dr. Sachin Patel is known as an authority in the field of functional and lifestyle medicine, and as an international speaker and author. Dr. Patel has delivered over 200 workshops and consulted with thousands of patients and has advised companies such as GE, Whole Foods, and ING Direct. He is the president and founder of the Living Proof Institute and Thyroid Bootcamp. And for the last 10 years, he has traveled all over the North of America to discover the most effective system to marketing wellness, which he now teaches to hundreds of doctors around the world. Dr. Patel was also recently featured in the Evolution of Medicine podcast, discussing his upcoming book, The Motivation Molecule. Dr. Sachin, welcome to our monthly forum, and thank you so much for your time and for your support.
Oh, Fabienne, thank you so much for having me, and Joe for facilitating this. I'm really excited, and Happy New Year to everyone that's listening. I think that 2016 is going to bring a lot of good things for good people. So I'm excited to start the journey this year with you folks, and hopefully I can add some insight and some information that can help all of you feel better or help get the message out there so others can feel better.
Wonderful. Dr. Sachin, what is the most common symptoms that you encounter in your practice? Can you share a little bit with us?
Sure. So we actually did a survey on Thyroid Bootcamp, and we had about 250 women fill it out. And we asked them what the most common symptom was. And weight gain obviously comes up, but when you take out weight gain, the most common complaint that people have, thyroid patients specifically have, is low motivation. And it's really interesting because that's the biggest challenge, to get people to actually do something for themselves if they're not motivated. They might do something for a short period of time, but to stay motivated requires specific biochemistry. And so what we find is that the patients, even the ones that are motivated enough to come see me in my practice, these patients sometimes have been from different doctor to different doctor, have tried many different things, and they usually try these things for a short period of time. And you'll hear these patients say, I did this and I only lost 10 pounds. Or I did this for a couple of weeks, and I felt good for a little while, and then I got burnt out on it. Usually, this is a result of issues with a molecule or a neurotransmitter that most of you might know that's called dopamine. And what's really interesting about dopamine is that the same nutrients that you need to make thyroid hormone, specifically in this case, you need B vitamins like B6, you need iron, and you also need tyrosine, which you need to make thyroid hormone itself. These are the nutrients that you need to make dopamine. So if somebody has a nutrient deficiency associated to their thyroid problem, then there's a possibility that they're also going to be deficient in dopamine because you need the same building blocks. And we know that a lot of thyroid patients are anemic, so being anemic also plays a role in dopamine production as well as serotonin production. But dopamine is what keeps people motivated. It's also the reward molecule, so it makes our brain feel good when we accomplish something. So when somebody says, I did this and I only lost 10 pounds, and they're not excited about it, whereas the practitioner is kind of jumping up and down in their seat, then that tells me that this patient can't feel that reward. And when you don't feel reward, you don't feel happiness, so then you want to give up. And because the happiness that we get doesn't come from losing the weight, it comes from the journey. And it requires us to release dopamine in order for us to do that. Now, when dopamine is low, people will start to crave certain types of foods, which tend to be the foods that aren't good for us. So high sugar foods, high fat foods, and usually the wrong types of fats. So, if we're trying to be specific here, they'll crave things like chocolate. And because chocolate actually contains a compound called PEA, which is very similar in structure to dopamine. So they'll literally crave chocolate and use it as a fix. So these are this is the most common symptom that we'll see with thyroid patients in our practice, aside from the physical attributes, right, which is the weight gain and some of those signs. But for the most part, that's the number one thing we see. And it's important to acknowledge that and then do something to correct it so that the patient can actually follow through with your recommendations, feel good about the results that they're seeing, and then continue that loop, because that reward and action loop is very important to make sure that circuit's complete.
Well, that is just a profound a truth that you just shared with us, because if it's that simple, right, well, then we just have to keep ourselves healthy, to keep ourselves happy, and then we'll be healthy.
Absolutely.
It's just amazing. What is the connection between motivation and the thyroid disease?
So the connection, I kind of gave a little bit of that away, is that they have common nutrient requirements. And another thing that's important to understand when it relates to dopamine production is to understand where dopamine comes from, but what dopamine turns into. So dopamine is a catecholamine, so it's one of our fight or flight type of neurotransmitters. It's what allows us to hunt and gather and stuff like that. But dopamine breaks down into noradrenaline and adrenaline. So people who have chronic stress are going to deplete their dopamine over time because they're going to be turning it into adrenaline and noradrenaline. So the chronic fight or flight response is very important when it comes to thyroid metabolism, because when we're in fight or flight, we're also making cortisol if our adrenals aren't burnt out. And when we're in fight or flight, it downregulates thyroid hormone metabolism. And what we'll find, the significance of this, is that patients might go to their doctor and their blood work is perfectly normal, and they're blaming the doctor, they're kind of questioning the blood work, and they're doing all these things, but really they should be jumping up and down because there's nothing wrong with their thyroid per se or their numbers. There's something wrong with the function. And function is a combination of, having the right nutrients and eliminating toxins, but it's also a function of cell signaling. So if somebody has chronic stress, they're going to deplete dopamine, but that chronic stress is also going to inhibit thyroid hormone metabolism. So of course we know that TSH production goes down when catecholamines and stress is high. We know that T4 doesn't convert into T3 as efficiently, and it actually converts into reverse T3. But if you test that, there's actually nothing wrong with the body. The body's doing exactly what it's programmed to do. We just don't like what it's doing because the body will favor survival over comfort. And so it'll do exactly what it needs to do to handle the stresses in your life so that you can survive those and not, and make it through the storm, if you will. But it doesn't care what you look like and what you feel like. And that's the problem, is if we don't make that connection between the two, then we're never really going to solve that patient's issue. We're just going to keep chasing the symptoms, and we're going to miss the functional aspect of getting that person's thyroid better.
Great. You talked about stress, and what are some of the root causes other than stress that you discover in your practice?
So stress is huge, obviously, but other things that we see, because we do quite a bit of testing with our patients, and when I say quite a bit, we do the right testing, so it just depends on what the patient needs. Typically, we do an organic acid test, and the organic acid test tells us about mitochondrial function. The mitochondria are the organelles in our cells, so think of the cell like a car, and then think of the mitochondria like the engine in that car, and then think of the driver like the hormone. So the hormone sends a message, just like we send a message to our car if we want it to turn right or turn left, or if we want to turn on the radio, or if we want to hit the accelerator. So we're constantly sending messages to our car, just like hormones are sending messages to our cells. Now, in order for our car to function, the engine itself has to be working. So no matter what quality fuel I'm putting into my car, this is the equivalent to eating healthy, I have to make sure the engine is actually able to do its job, and it is functioning appropriately. And then I have to make sure the signals that I'm sending to the engine are appropriate for the outcome that I'm looking for. So just using the car and the engine and everything as an analogy, what we have to realize is there's a few things that would impact the function of that car. One is the driver, right? So the driver is the user, and that's us in this case. The other thing is the cell, which is the car itself, and then the engine of the car itself. And the other thing is the environment. The environment also changes the signal. So if I'm in a stressful environment, I'm going to change the signals that I'm sending to my cell. And no matter how healthy that cell is, the cell is going to carry out stress function. So for example, if I get a cell perfectly healthy, let's say somebody's eating really healthy, they have good nutrition, they're taking all their supplements, but if they don't send the right message to the cell, if they're sending the cell constantly a message of fight or flight, then the cell is going to carry out fight or flight catabolic activity. But if they send that same cell parasympathetic messages, which is to rest and digest and to relax and those type of messages, then the same cell is going to produce a completely different outcome. So it's important to look at cell signaling. It's important to look at, when we're dealing with thyroid patients, to look at what message are we sending to the cell. It's important to assess the environment of that patient, because if they're in a high-stress environment or if they're in a toxic environment, and toxic could be, the air fresheners that they plug into the wall, or it could be the off-gassing of chemicals, or it could be toxic relationships, or they might have a job that they don't like, which is toxic to the brain. So toxicity is something that interferes with thyroid health. We also see a lot of things that are associated with emotional health. So there's a big part of thyroid health and emotional health. And what I found is, and we talked about this, I know, at the Mastermind, is that there's almost always an emotional connection when it comes to most thyroid conditions. And that could be abuse. It could be, it could be just not being able to vocalize or express yourself. We know, or most of you probably know, that the throat chakra is right where our thyroid is. And so if we have a suppressed voice, which unfortunately women often do, they might not be as outspoken. They might not be treated equally or fairly in certain circumstances, and they just kind of have to bite their tongue. But that energy stagnates in the throat chakra. So not being able to speak your truth also, we found, makes a big difference. And when it comes to autoimmunity, we always ask our patients, your body is wrongfully attacking itself. Is there somewhere in your life that you're wrongfully attacking yourself or not properly expressing yourself, because there's some stagnation here? Another thing that we'll see is GI issues. And GI issues cause chronic inflammation, and they cause increased levels of cytokine activity. And cytokines, as we know, are the proteins that signal the antibodies to destroy the thyroid or whatever other tissues they've tagged. So GI issues are a big deal. And then, I might be preaching to the choir here, but of course diet. Diet plays a huge role. Your diet provides nutrition for the cells and for the organs to function properly, but your diet also provides information, and that information communicates directly with your microbiome, and the microbiome is huge because it regulates immune function, amongst other things. And of course, all Hashimoto's patients have an autoimmune condition, but most thyroid patients have Hashimoto. So getting back to, what information are we sending to that microbiome through the diet is also very important. And just since we're on diet, another thing that we often make it a point to discuss with our patients is that it's not just what you're eating, but how you're eating that food that makes a big difference. And maybe we'll get to that a little bit later on the call. But there's a variety of things that can interfere, that we find interfere with thyroid health. And of course, there's heavy metals, there's poor circadian rhythm, there's also, EMF exposure. So there's a variety of things that can interfere with thyroid health. And it's important that, if you're working with a practitioner, or if you're a practitioner yourself, that you kind of look beyond the things that you can test as well. It's not just what we can measure that's creating the problem. A lot of times it's things that we can't measure, but we need to just discuss with the patient, and we can have some major breakthroughs when you start talking with the patient.
I can't tell you how refreshing it is to hear you speaking about these aspects of ourselves that we so rarely hear when we go to our doctor, because it is so profoundly important how we feel and how, if we were, treated unfairly. And it's a broad subject, and I'm really curious, what are some of the methods that you have to uncover and to help with emotional health related to the thyroid disease in your practice?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So we actually use something called the Dalian method. And the Dalian method is spelled D-A-L-I-A-N method. It's actually a self-help technique. And the first time you do it, you generally want to meet with a facilitator who can facilitate the process. But what's really neat about it is that it's different than any other type of therapy, if you will. So let's say, for example, hypothetically, I love my wife, and you know that, you've met her, but let's say I had a problem with her, and I just couldn't express myself. So I came to Fabienne and confided in you, and I said, here's my problem with her, this, and this. Now, that's different. I'm going to use a completely different syntax with talking about the problem with you than I would with what's going on in my head, but I'm also going to talk about my wife in the third person instead of talking to her directly. So I would use different language in my head, and if I'm talking to my wife, compared to what I'm going to be saying to you, if that makes sense. So what happens during the Dalian method is that it's a combination of meditation, kind of self-hypnosis, and self-awareness. And what you do is you take a deep breath in, and then whatever thought comes to your consciousness, not to your mind, we're trying to take the mind out of this, but whatever thought comes to your consciousness, you're just going to say it out loud. And usually the things that are bothering you are the things that are going to be on your mind, right? These are the first things that, or not on your mind, but on your, at a conscious level where you can grasp them. So you're going to say things that you want to say, and you're going to vocalize them in a way you would vocalize them. So if in your head you're swearing, then you swear, right, when you say it out loud during this method. If in your head you're saying things that you wouldn't normally say out loud, then you say those things. And so it's best, initially it's best done through a facilitator so they can make sure you're using the right language, the right syntax. But then once you get the hang of that, then you could basically do it on your own. So there's a guided meditations sort of CD that you can get that walks you through the process. And certainly you can continue meeting with a facilitator if you want. But we've seen some profound changes because now people get to say what they're actually thinking, not necessarily. So they get to say what they need to say, not what they want to say. Those are two different things.
Right. So they're just opening their fifth chakra, they're opening their throat, and basically they're just allowing the feelings, the words to be released.
Right. Exactly. So, our frontal cortex prevents us from, slapping people across the face and punching people and swearing and doing all those things, right? So there's a lot of stagnation that takes place in the frontal cortex, which, that's where our crown chakra is, right? So we lose our connection with that higher place when we've got a lot of stagnant energy up there too, right? There's a lot that people want to say that they're not saying, and when they're not saying it, they're not releasing it, and that energy has to store itself somewhere, right? Energy can't be created or destroyed, it just changes forms. And so if we can't vocalize that energy, because our voice is power, it's energy, it's sound, which is energy, then that energy just stays inside us, right? And it vibrates at a frequency that we're not really looking to attract into our lives, right? We have to make sure that if we want our life to go the way we want it to, we've got to stay positive and vibrate at a certain frequency, and we can't have all these negative thoughts floating around in our minds and clouding our consciousness.
Right. Amazing. So, Doctor, just as a question like that, I'm just thinking, do you think we can maybe take 5 minutes to do some exercise like that into a little meditation? I know it's a very spontaneous question, but could you take us for 5 minutes into a little sample of what it would look like? Or maybe we'll have to have you another time and just have a whole session. Hello?
Oh, hi. Sorry.
Oh,
okay.
I'm not sure if you heard my question or not.
I did. I did hear your question. So, and I actually started talking, but I forgot to unmute myself. So what I would suggest is that everyone kind of goes online and gets familiar with it, because the exercise is a very vocal exercise, and so it's hard to do it over the phone, if you will. And so it's a 96-minute process. So there's 3 different phases that you go through, and I can kind of prime people. So what you would do is you would do deep belly breathing. You would breathe in through your mouth or your nose, whatever is most effective for you. You know, if you have some sinus issues and you can breathe through your mouth, it doesn't really matter. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take a deep breath in, and then whatever thought comes to you, just say it. Okay? No filter, whatever it is. If you, like I said, if it's graphic or if it's profane, if it's whatever it is, if it's offensive, it doesn't matter, right? Because you need to get that out of you, right? So if you're not willing to say it out loud, or you're embarrassed to say it out loud, then you can imagine what's happening inside your head because it's there, right? And so you just have to release that. So if it's like, you know, for example, if it's a patient that frustrated you, or if it's a client that frustrated you, or somebody hurt you in some sort of way, whatever comes up, you're just going to say it out loud. And then as you get more into it, as you kind of get used to the idea that somebody's listening to your deepest, darkest, most intimate thoughts, then you can walk around, you can punch, you can kick the air, punch, you know, you can get a punching bag too if you want. But after you say the thought, you take a deep breath out. So you blow it out forcefully. So almost like the wind is that thought, right? Or the wind is that energy that you're just blowing it out and completely releasing it. And so you do this, you know, you're visualizing different parts of your body as you're doing the breathing exercises. And this kind of takes the mind out of it. It takes the mind away from distracting the thought and controlling the process. So the idea is to let your kind of your subconscious control the thought process, and then distract your brain by focusing on the breathing and focusing on different parts of the body as you're doing the breathing exercise.
Great. And if our members would like more information about this, is that on your website, Dr. Sachin?
So it's not on my website, but it's called the Dalian Method. And I believe it's the DalianMethod.com. While I'm on the call, I can just check that on my computer real quick.
And I can post it on our meetup.com tomorrow for everybody to have it.
Okay, great.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing this method.
No problem.
And I would like to go to another subject, such as I would like to talk about the supplements. And how can patients reduce the amount of supplements and hopefully medication that they are taking? What is your take on that?
Well, the first thing is we have to understand the role of supplements. And supplements are essentially just that. They're a supplement. What are they supplementing? The question is, are they supplementing a healthy lifestyle and a healthy diet, or are they supplementing an unhealthy lifestyle and an unhealthy diet? And so the first thing we want to do is we really want to take a look at our diet and nutrition and our lifestyle and pay attention to that, because if you're not addressing the root causes of the problem, of the deficiency or of the toxicity, then you're really not going to, you're going to just have to keep taking these supplements for the rest of your life. You're not really addressing the underlying mechanism that caused this deficiency. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's people that come into my office and, you know, they come in with a garbage bag full of stuff and they say, okay, I take all this stuff and I feel pretty good. And I'm like, well, you know, why do you need all this stuff? That's the first question. So is it because you're not eating enough? Is it because you're not digesting what you're eating adequately? Or is it because your stress levels or the demands of these nutrients are so high that you can't keep up with that demand? And so it's important to answer those three layers of the problem. When we can answer those three layers, then we can start getting some answers, because if something's causing a nutrient deficiency in the body, it's likely causing other issues. Now, if somebody has high stress and we're giving them high doses of B vitamins and we're giving them adrenal support and we're giving them, you know, all of these cofactors that they need for adrenal health, then are we really helping them? And the answer might be we're just palliating them. We're palliating them so they can continue doing the things that are killing them. And I don't think that's the right approach either. So we really have to be, if we really want to help someone, we have to be honest with them. We have to be totally transparent with them. And we have to tell them, listen, this is a short-term solution, but the long-term solution is to, whatever it is, quit your job or, you know, whatever it is that you're putting off that's causing all this stress and tension in your life, that's what you have to change. Otherwise, we're just using the supplement the same way we would use a drug. We're not really fixing anything. And a big thing that we find for a lot of patients is they don't really understand how the stress response works. The stress response is really interesting because when we have a stress response, it literally changes the function of every cell in our body. So our organs completely change what they're doing. Our digestive system stops digesting. Our salivary glands stop producing saliva. Our thyroid stops producing thyroid hormone and converting it. Our heart increases its heart rate. Our blood pressure goes up. Our immune system basically shuts down. So all the things that we want to be healthy and need to be healthy and vibrant are basically turned off by the stress response. And so a lot of supplements I find are associated, especially the thyroid patients that come see me, are associated with dealing and managing with an out-of-control stress response or inflammation response, which, again, inflammation is basically an extension of stress. So that's what we need to focus on, is why they need the supplements and what we can do to address the root cause so that we can kind of break this cycle of constantly needing to be dependent on supplementation.
Great. Yes. Stress. I was just reflecting on stress for myself. I think we don't even know what stress really is and how far we've come in our lifestyle. We think we're stressed all the time, and
yep.
Just reflecting on that for yourself, like what would my life look like without stress? just waking up, so early in the morning and going to bed when it's so late at night when it's dark is so far from what we are designed for, right? Where our body works.
If we were pets,
about that? Mm-hmm.
If we were pets, we'd all be dead. Right? Because there's that's what's so amazing about the human body, right? If you treated your fish the way most people treat their bodies, the whole tank would be dead, right? So the human body is so resilient, and it's kind of the gift and the curse. It allows us to take advantage of that because it doesn't, it doesn't kill us the first time. It doesn't even kill us the 1,000th time we do something wrong. It just adapts. And that plasticity that we have is what allows us to make decisions that we know aren't good for us. Right? If you put Doritos in your fish tank and you came back tomorrow, your fish would all be dead. You'd never do that again. So, it's important. It's really crazy. How stressed out our bodies really are. We're literally fish out of water. When you think about things like electromagnetic radiation, when you think of our exposure to artificial light, which is excessive, when you think about how poor people's sleep is these days, when you think about the stress during the day that people have, and the lack of passion that people have for the things that they do. I mean, you're lucky to have found something you're really passionate about, as am I, and I'm sure Joe is as well, and whoever's on this call. You're lucky if you're doing something you're passionate about, that you enjoy doing, that you would do for free, or you would do regardless of your financial situation. There's a majority of people, when they interviewed Americans, 80% of them didn't like what they did for a living, so they really had no good reason to wake up the next day, except to make more money to buy things that they don't need.
Right, that's enough to get depressed.
Well, it's a cycle that you can't get out of, right? Because, the other thing, too, is a dopamine-deprived society usually looks for quick fixes. Like dopamine is our hunter-gatherer molecule, right? So it makes us want to go out for the hunt and keeps us focused and concentrated on bringing some food back. Well, we can skip that entire process by just going to the mall and buying food, or we can skip that entire reward process or hunting process and just go to the mall and buy whatever we want, right? So spending money increases dopamine. It's called retail therapy. So what happens now is people find other ways to increase these neurotransmitters where before you didn't have any other options. You couldn't do that before. And of course, that depletion of dopamine, which is caused by the chronic stress, just perpetuates the problem. It's just like this never-ending cycle.
Right. You take a unique approach with your patient, Dr. Patel, and you call it the 6-pillared approach, correct? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the Living Proof method, which is something that we've developed over the last few years working with patients, basically covers 6 pillars. And these pillars are essential to health. And there's no chronic condition or a state of health that doesn't require these pillars functioning optimally. So the beautiful thing about these pillars is that you're always going to want them working for you. It's like the foundation of your house. You want to make sure that the foundation is strong so you can build a nice, beautiful house on it. And the pillars are, they work synergistically together. So what we know is that when a patient comes in and they're in a certain state of health, typically they've gotten a diagnosis. So that diagnosis might be Hashimoto's, it might be RA, it might be celiac disease, it might be heart disease. Whatever the diagnosis is basically a very narrowed down pinpoint description of what that patient has. Now, when you think about somebody with thyroid disease or any other disease, mind you, whether it be diabetes or cancer, they don't just have that problem. You'll never meet a diabetic who's just a diabetic. You'll never meet a thyroid patient who's just a thyroid patient. Usually these chronic conditions have multiple systems involved, and it might be that the thyroid is the initial victim because the thyroid is so sensitive to our current environmental situation. So it's sensitive to heavy metals, it's sensitive to stress, it's sensitive to nutrient deficiencies. So it's going to show up as a thyroid problem, but the thyroid is just one of the victims of this global dysfunction that's taking place in the body. And what happens is people come in and they've got a diagnosis, and they might have been to doctors, been to specialists, and everyone's focusing on the thyroid because that's what their diagnosis is. But lo and behold, they might have other problems that are not being investigated because it's not part of their diagnosis. And so you get people coming in that have normal blood work because they're on medications and their dosage is just right. And if it's normal, how can your doctor adjust the dose? It doesn't make sense. But what we have to do is we have to look at the global picture of that person's health. And that's what these pillars allow us to do, because it allows us to take a more expanded approach instead of a very focused approach. And so the worst thing I can do for any patient that comes to my office with thyroid disease is fix their thyroid and fix nothing else, right? Mm-hmm. The best thing I can do for this person is look at the root causes, and as a consequence, or rather a benefit of addressing the root causes, not only do we address the thyroid issue, assuming that it's fixable at that point, but we also prevent other diseases from crossing that clinical or diagnostic threshold. And so the 6 pillars allow us to do that in virtually every case, whether it's cancer, heart disease, diabetes, thyroid disease, whatever it is. So the 6 pillars are first the mitochondria. The mitochondria produce ATP. Now ATP is basically the unit of energy that our body uses. All biological processes require ATP. So if I want to heal, I want to repair, I want to regenerate tissue, I need ATP to do that. The other thing that's important about mitochondrial function is that the mitochondria convert our fat into energy. So when somebody's overweight and they say, I want more energy, I need more energy, well, the irony in that is they have more energy than they could ever use, right? Because fat is stored energy. Fat is actually the most dense form of energy that our body has, but they're just not turning that energy into ATP. They're not metabolizing fat into ATP. So they have all the energy they want. It's just locked away in this kind of storage account, and somebody's thrown away the key. And the key is the hormone itself and mobilizing that fat and getting it into the mitochondria. So we measure Krebs cycle through a test called organic acids, which then allows us to identify how well their body is turning fats, carbohydrates, and proteins into ATP. So this is the first fundamental pillar. The next one is detoxification and oxidation. And so we know that our liver helps us detoxify through the cytochrome P450 pathways. There's phase 1, phase 2, liver detoxification. People do detoxes all the time. But what you have to realize is the liver was designed to detoxify us. It wasn't designed to detoxify the planet and everything around us and all the makeup and lotions and potions and things like that we put on our bodies. So the liver usually has an excessive burden on it. And just like most things, everyone has a different capacity. So some people genetically are going to be more tolerant to toxicity. They just have better detoxification capacity, and some people are going to be less tolerant to detoxification. So it's important to assess this with patients so that we know how to best support them nutritionally. And then, of course, we don't want to just promote detoxification programs. We want to promote detoxifying the environment that led to the toxicity and leads to the stress on the liver itself. The next one is brain health and methylation. So we focus on neurotransmitter health as well as methylation. Methylation, as you know, is important for many things besides simply brain health and neurotransmitter production. It's important for detoxification. It's important for glutathione production. It's important for the production of melatonin, which helps us sleep at night. It's important for breaking down our stress hormones, our catecholamines like epinephrine and norepinephrine. It's important for preventing heart disease. So methylation is a very critical process, and it's important that people have adequate methyl donors, which are come from B9 and B12, folic acid and B12. The next pillar is diet and digestion. So it's not just what you eat, but how you digest it. We tell our patients that digestion is like a car wash. So think of a car wash and think of the car coming out of the car wash. Now, the car going into the car wash is equivalent to the food that you eat, and the car coming out is equivalent to the stool, right? It's the opposite in this case. It goes in clean, comes out dirty, but the car goes in dirty and comes out clean. But when you think about that, it makes perfect sense. So when you go to a car wash, the first step is choosing the right car wash, right? So we want to go to a car wash that is going to do a nice job on our car. It's not going to scratch it. It's not going to damage it. And hopefully it has the minimal environmental impact possible. So we can be conscious about what we're doing to the environment. So you go through a car wash. What do? The first thing you do when you go to the car wash is you put the car in neutral. So that's important because it's important for us to put our fight or flight response in neutral. It's important for us to be in a parasympathetic state in order for us to properly digest our food. So putting the car in neutral is critical, and then digesting that food is going to depend on each and every step being done. So when you're going through the car wash, every step relies on the previous step being done, and it builds on that previous step. And if you miss a step, you're in trouble. So a lot of people don't chew their food. So think of this scenario. You have a patient that's at work. They've got a job that they don't really care for. They've got a half-hour lunch during which they're checking emails and they're sitting at their desk, which their subconscious has already identified as a stressful environment. So they've got a sympathetic response going. They're being interrupted constantly with phone calls or emails or whatever the case may be. And they're not chewing their food, right, because they're just mindlessly eating at this point. And then they're drinking a lot of fluid. So you've basically set up a disastrous state for digestion. What ends up happening is you have all this undigested food that's going to enter into the stomach. The stomach wasn't prepared because your stomach doesn't release stomach acid unless you're chewing your food and unless you're in a parasympathetic state. So now they're going to have all these undigested proteins and food that is undigested rotting inside their gut for the next 36 to 72 hours. And that's going to create bacterial overgrowth. It's going to create inflammation. It's going to create nutrient deficiency because you need each and every step for that digestive process to work. Your stomach doesn't have teeth. You have to chew your food. Your pancreas doesn't make hydrochloric acid. Your stomach has to do that. Your gallbladder your pancreas doesn't store bile or release bile. Your gallbladder does that. So each and every step of that process is critical in order to take that food down to its molecular level. And when you can't do that, then you create inflammation, you create dysbiosis, you create SIBO, you create leaky gut, and then these undigested proteins enter into the bloodstream, creating a cytokine response, and that cytokine response triggers any antibodies that you have, which then causes a thyroid storm, right? So it's all connected. And so what you eat and how you eat it makes a big difference. And then, of course, elimination is huge. So it's not just what you eat and how you digest it, but it's also how you eliminate it. And that's important, especially since many thyroid patients suffer from constipation. So a really good test that people can do is they can do a sesame seed test where they can take a tablespoon of sesame seeds and just swallow them whole with water, and just pay attention. They act like little trackers, so they can track how long it takes them to move things through their bowel. And it shouldn't take more than 24 hours for you to see the sesame seeds in your stool. Some people go every day, but they're not getting rid of what they ate yesterday. It might be something they ate 2 or 3 days ago. And so we have a lot of our patients do this sesame seed stool tracer test. The next pillar is stress, hormones, and inflammation. As we discussed earlier, cortisol, inflammation, and catecholamines all affect hormone production, not just thyroid hormone production, but stress affects the production of estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. So all of these hormones become impacted. And that's why it's important to realize that you'll never just have a thyroid problem. It's almost impossible. Unless you had a thyroid removal, there's no way that you're just going to have a thyroid problem. And then the last pillar is lifestyle and environment. And I would say that that's probably, if I had to pick a pillar that's probably the most important, it's the lifestyle and environment, because that's what resulted in all the other pillars being off, is the choices that people make and the environments that they surround themselves in. So with this approach, we're able to quantify 5 out of 6 of those pillars. So we can measure mitochondria, we can measure detox, we can measure methylation and neurotransmitters, we can measure digestive function, and we can quantify cortisol and other hormone levels. What we can't measure is lifestyle and environment, and that's where we spend a lot of time coaching our patients and making them self-aware and teaching them the things that they can do when they leave our practice, and also, shifting the responsibility. So when a patient comes to us, it's an 80-20 split. They're going to do 80% of the work. We're going to do 20% of the work. When most people go to the doctor, it's the opposite. They want the doctor to do 80% of the work, which is figuring out what prescription they're going to have and what diet they're going to eat and all this stuff. And they want to do 20%, and that's just not fair. So in our office, we flip the ratio, and that's what you want, because at the end of the day, you want to be responsible for your health. You don't want to leave that up to somebody else.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this is why we do this work. This is why we have you and teaching us. And it's a lot of information, I realize that. But the good thing is that it's all recorded and it's going to be posted on our channel on YouTube, Hashimoto's Awareness channel. So I often do myself. Actually, I take notes and re-listen to all this wonderful information because it is a lot to integrate all at once. I wish I would have met you 30 years ago, Dr. Patel.
I would have been 8 years old. I would have been no good to
you. All right, then. Fair enough. I want to tell everybody that if they want to get in touch with you, they can do this at thelivingproofinstitute.com if they have any questions or they want to connect. And I think, Joe, it's about time to open the question and answer line.
Sure. Let me do that right now. If you'll just give me 1 second.
Sure.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the line into Q&A mode, and then all of the callers who have dialed in will have the opportunity to hit *6 on their telephone, and that will be them raising their hand to ask a question. So let me turn that mode on right now.
Great.
Okay, so if you have a question, you can press *6 on your telephone. We have a caller right here.
Wonderful.
Hi. I just want to thank you so much, first of all, because I feel like everything you're saying is all the things that I've been trying to research myself and just looking for validation from someone out there who has, traveled this road before me. So I just want to thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for listening.
Oh, yeah. So my question is, I suppose, a lot of things that are that you've mentioned are kind of happening to me, but one thing is kind of stumping me, which is hair loss.
Okay.
And I've just had all my hormones tested by my doctor, and I'm going in tomorrow because they just gave me the results and nothing else so I don't know how to interpret those results. But everything seems to be normal. But I just don't know where to turn and how much of it is me or how much of it is the levothyroxine, because I know that's a side effect of that is hair loss. So I don't really know where to go. I don't know if you know any or can
Sure.
help.
So great. Yeah, great question. So there's a couple things when it comes to hair loss. Let me ask you, does your nose ever feel cold? The tip of your nose?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So the tip of your nose and the tip of your fingers typically have the same size blood vessels. And so if you're not getting blood flow to the tip of your nose, you're not getting blood flow to your scalp. And so that microcirculation, if it's insufficient, then that doesn't nourish the follicle, so that could be a source of hair loss. And keep in mind that it might be one of the things I tell you, or it could be a combination of the things that I'm telling you. But certainly if you're not getting blood flow to the tip of your nose, you're not getting it to your scalp. And my suspicion would be that you might even have some brain fog as well, and I might be presumptuous there. But
I had two questions, and I was like, I was going to pick one, and it was hair loss, but memory was my other one, yes.
Yeah, so it requires adequate blood flow, right, for anything to happen, because that's how nutrients are delivered to that space. So certainly a couple things that can help. One is practicing something called pranayama, which is deep breathing exercises, and you can go on Google and find them, and or YouTube, and you can find pranayama exercises. Another thing is to increase microcirculation. And so you can increase microcirculation by things like magnesium, because magnesium helps dilate blood vessels. You can also increase, there's a great product made by Apex Energetics. It's called Nitric Balance. And Nitric Balance basically opens up, for lack of a better word, it basically opens up the valve so you can get more blood flow to the brain and other tissues. Put simply, but you'll also notice your brain fog will start to clear up with that product as well. Another part for hair loss could be protein insufficiency. So if you're not getting enough protein in your diet, make sure you get enough B vitamins, especially biotin. And the last thing, and probably just as important, is ferritin. So ferritin is your stored iron. And if your ferritin levels are low, then usually that can result in hair loss. They usually say that if your ferritin is less than 100, then your hair won't grow back. So your ferritin, you want it above 100 to expect new hair to grow.
So I've read and researched that, and I've brought that up with my doctor, but she's not interested in the fact that my ferritin is just below normal. And so I don't know.
It's not her problem. It's not her ferritin, right?
Yeah. So I just don't know if it's something I can do myself if she's not interested in that. Like, do I supplement that or? You can start taking iron glycinate. You can just start by taking 30 milligrams a day. Yeah.
And that's a chelated form of iron. So that
can you repeat the name of that?
I'm trying to think of which brand I would. It's iron glycinate. We use Designs for Health, or we use Zymogen. You won't be able to find Zymogen online. You can find Designs for Health online, and I can share. I have a link. We have an online store. I can send you a 10% discount and I can send you the link for it if you want to try it. But that's a very safe form of iron, and it's pretty inexpensive, and it doesn't cause constipation. So. So that might be a good starting point for you. And keep in mind that you need iron. Iron is what is central to our red blood cells. So that's important for nutrient delivery and circulation, and also, for neurotransmitter function as well. So we need your dopamine and serotonin levels, where they're going to be low too if you don't have enough iron. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does a lot. And I don't know if you guys are going to cover this or, so I'm going to, leave it so other people can ask questions. But do you see people, because I'm in New York, do you see people in New York? Is there a way of...
So I do work with patients remotely, but what I try to do is I try to find them a practitioner in their area.
Right, okay.
And the reason I say that is it's a lot easier for you. Right?
Yeah.
And we kind of look at it from the user experience standpoint.
Yeah.
So if I can't find anybody that I would recommend close to you that's doing something similar, then certainly we can consult with you or co-consult. So if you've got a practitioner, then I can kind of work with them and and they can manage your case as opposed to me managing it. I would love to teach whoever's working with how to do this so they can help other people in your community. But certainly, if you can't find someone and we need to, we can have one of our clinicians work with you. I personally, just to be totally transparent, I see patients for the first visit, and then I have one of my partner practitioners take over their case from there. So
that makes sense.
you'd be working with our team if that was the case.
And I would just go to your website and do that, or
if you want to go. Yeah, if you want to go to iamproof.com, so iamproof.com, then that's our patient portal. So you can actually go there and you can go to that website and enter your contact information in, and it'll take you to a scheduling page. You can schedule a free phone consultation, so we can do a free 20-minute phone consultation with you. And then from there, we can figure out, what the next steps would be. But you can schedule that whenever you want, and then it also sends you all of our intake forms and packets and everything like that automatically get emailed to you when you register as well. So that's the quickest and easiest way to take the next step.
Well, thank you so much. I literally could almost cry. It's such a relief to just hear things that I know that is going on, and I go and I think people think I'm crazy, and I start to think, am I crazy? But, you're crazy to think you're crazy.
No problem. Can I get your name, please?
Yeah, mine. Are you recording this? I think
But you don't have to do you can just say your first name.
Oh, Ryan. My name is Ryan.
Okay, I just wanted to know who to look out for.
Yes.
Oh, right, yeah. Sure.
Thank you so much for reaching out, Ryan. And
thank you so much for the meetup group. And
absolutely. And any information that Dr. Patel gave us, I will make sure that I post it on Meetup and send you all an email with that information so you all have it, okay?
Thank you so much.
Very well. Stay in touch.
Thank you for the question, and we're going to see if there's another question in the queue. So as a reminder, if you hit *6 on your telephone, you'll be able to ask a question.
Until we have another question coming up, I wanted to mention a wonderful movie that I saw. It's a documentary, actually, and it's called Happiness. Have you seen this movie, Dr. Patel? Happiness?
You know what? I haven't seen it yet. I think it's on Netflix, so it is on my list. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, though. What'd you think?
Oh, it's so worth it. It really is a study. The director, the producer, went all over the world, and he interviewed communities and individuals about happiness. And they discovered that happiness had a lot to do with community. Mm-hmm. Right? So this is what HA is doing also. We're building community for you so that you find the support and you're not out there feeling crazy and all of that. I know exactly what it feels like because I was myself in the case many years. And so happiness is community. And they also realize that, talking about money, they said that people that made between $50,000 and $150,000 was not much different at all. Their level of stress and happiness was not based on that. Which is an amazing, it's this amazing discovery, you know.
Yeah, I think once your base needs are met, then making more money doesn't really change your quality of life, right?
Exactly, and most people don't realize that. So I highly recommend this documentary for everybody.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yes. Do we have any other questions, Joe?
Well, I have a question for Dr. Patel.
Sure.
You actually described the way I ate my lunch today at work. How can I eat my food better? Do I need to chew my food a lot longer? Do I need to spend more time eating because I eat rather quickly?
Yeah. So really, food is a very sacred. Eating is a very sacred event. It only happens 3 times a day, if we're lucky, maybe more. But it's important that you sit down and really understand what's happening. That food literally is going to become you, right? That food is going to become your thoughts. That food is going to fuel your actions. That food is going to incorporate itself into your cells. So it's actually, we think of food as something transient, that, I'm going to eat this, and I know it may not be good for me, and I'm going to poop it out tomorrow. And that's kind of how we think about food. But, food builds your cells, and some of your cells stick around for a couple of years, right? Some of your cells stick around for a few days. So it literally becomes bits and pieces of you. And that what you ate today is going to hang around for a few months or even a couple of years in some instances. And so that's important, that just understanding that, and I think that understanding is quite profound, and you start to realize, okay, this is something that's pretty cool that's happening. I'm going to take this food, and it's going to be completely broken down into its individual amino acids and proteins and stuff, and molecules, and it's going to then be absorbed into my system and then put back together, right? Like IKEA furniture, it's going to be put all back together into bits and pieces of me. So just having that understanding and that kind of that level of gratitude for what's actually taking place, I think that's important. Just puts us in the right mindset consciously, and our subconscious then follows. The other thing that's important to do is, check your environment, right? Is it an environment where you're highly distracted, where you're kind of looking over your shoulder the whole time? Is it an environment that your brain has associated with stress? Is it an environment, like, kind of like when people have a white coat response when they go to the doctor's office, they've associated that environment with fear, right? And so if we do that with our occupations as well. If there's a particular space that you're working out of that normally is a stressful environment for you, then changing the environment, the visual cues, the auditory cues, the olfactory, which is the sense of smell cues, all of those things change the level of stress or subtle stress response that your body's undergoing. So if it's nice outside, eat outside, or go somewhere and have a meal with someone that you enjoy hanging out with, right? And then chew your food. So chew your food as thoroughly as you can. Just keep in mind that especially when you're eating healthy food, that the human body, and this is actually very important, when you're eating like fruits and vegetables and things like that, the human body cannot digest cellulose. And all plant cells, if you look at a kale of leaf under a microscope, you're going to see that every cell of that kale has a lining around it. And that lining is made out of, the outer shell of that cell is made out of cellulose. And our digestive system doesn't contain the enzyme to digest through that cell wall, which means that if you swallow a piece of kale, you literally can't digest it. So you have to actually chew it. When you chew that kale and you open up that cell wall by crushing the cell wall mechanically with your teeth and grinding those nutrients out of that food, you actually are able to extract more nutrition from that food. The other thing that happens when you actually chew your food is you taste your food. And by tasting your food more thoroughly, you actually send the brain a message based on that taste. It calculates what amount of stomach acid, pancreatic enzymes, and gallbladder secretions the digestive system needs to prepare, in order to digest that food. So how you taste your food also matters. So if somebody's not chewing their food, they're not increasing the surface area of it, they're not extracting all the nutrition from it. Digestion actually chemically starts in the mouth because your saliva starts breaking down amylase, carbohydrates and glucose and stuff like that. It also starts the digestion process. And so many things happen in the mouth, and we spend such short time there. Think of it like the rinse cycle in your car, right? So if you've got a really dirty car and you just spend a couple of seconds with the hose just kind of wafting at it, right, you're not going to really get you're not going to get a good result, right? But if you spend, if you have a high pressure hose and you're just really hosing your car down, taking all the mud and all the salt and all the other stuff off of it, then the next step works much better. Then when you pull out a sponge with soap on it, you're not scratching the car up with all this dirt and debris that you didn't do a good job rinsing off in the first place. So there's a lot to think about there when it comes to just chewing your food, but it all happens automatically, right? The key here is understanding that the body is quite sophisticated, right? Which means that we shouldn't, what we do in our current healthcare system is we try to match the complexity of the body to solve the body's problems. But the body is so complex that we'll never get to that point. It's foolish for us to even pursue that goal. What we have to realize is that the greatest sign of sophistication is simplicity. So the body doesn't require us to be just as complex. We don't just need as complex a solution to fix this problem. We need a simple solution, and the sophistication of the body is what provides us with that simple solution. Just think of your computer. If you had to match the complexity of the computer to use it, the computer would be useless to it. The computer is useful and powerful because it's simple to use.
What a great perspective. Thank you.
Beautiful.
You're welcome.
We are coming to an end, and I want to thank you all for coming and joining us and asking those questions, because they're for all of us. We all have the same questions, so thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting HA. And Joe, do you have something to add?
Yes, I'd just like to add that Hashimoto's Awareness is a nonprofit organization, and we rely entirely on the donations of our supporters. So if you'd like to support our cause, please visit our website at hashimotosawareness.org and click on the Donate heart in the upper right-hand corner. And thank you all for joining today.
Thank you so much. Until next month, Dr. Sachin Patel, thank you so much for your inspiration.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yes. And we'll be in
Thank
touch. You send me all the information you want me to post on ourmeetup.com, and I will forward that to you all.
Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And, if there's anything I can do, then please let me know. But keep up the great work, and congratulations on all the amazing things coming to you in 2016.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And we'll be in touch. Please send our love at home to your son and your darling wife. And we'll talk soon.